All right, Kristen or Pam?
Yeah, I was just going to say that this is our final presentation on the performance indicators on your district goal that you established for us on academic achievement and school culture. And so this is the last area we are going to look at, and it has to do with advanced placement. And for people out there who don't know, when we talk about AP, that's taking college level classes here at RB. And so the AP is just abbreviation of that. So our teachers that teach the AP courses, they have to register with the college board. They have to get audited through them, so they have to have enough coursework themselves, and their curriculum has to be approved nationally, so that when a student is taking an AP course here, it would be the equivalent to an AP course at another school. And that just gives a little bit of background. And then Kristen was going to work with all the wonderful department chairs that are tired here to present about what they're doing, how we achieved with our students this past year, and then what they're doing in order to work forward on the ever moving goal of going up and up with our achievement. So Kristen, you may take over.
So before I jump into the data, if the department chairs could just go around and introduce themselves.
Doug Schultz, the math department chair.
Brennan Denny, science department chair.
Jill McGrath, world languages.
John Beasley, social sciences.
And Sarah Johnson, English.
So I'm just going to go through quickly some of the data, and then you'll hear from each of the department chairs about what they're doing to address the scores and the pass rates within their department. So the first indicator was looking at AP students with passing scores. And passing scores consist of earning a 3, 4, or 5 on the exam. And so you can see in 2013, our percentage dropped a little bit, but we still surpassed the Illinois percentage of 66.3% and the global percentage as well. We also, while that number did drop, the percent of exams passed this year at RB went up slightly to 66% than it had been in the past. Looking at AP equity and excellence, that number is the percentage of a school's entire 12th grade class who earned a 3 or higher on at least one AP exam at any point in their high school career. So it could be a student who took the test and passed as a sophomore, a junior or a senior, and so you can see that number did decrease from 2012 to 2013, and that'd probably be about approximately 36 fewer students. And for this number, it's really hard to predict or even really get at the cause of why it dropped. We can kind of speculate. It could be that they took more elective courses and chose not to take an AP. It could be they took an AP course but they got a 2. It could be a variety of different things. But I think something that is important to note is that the 40.1% still surpasses the Illinois average of 19.9% and the average for the United States, which is 19.7. And that really speaks to the open access of the AP courses that we offer at RB. And then the next page just gives you a breakdown of the number of tests taken and pass rates for each department. And you can see, and I'll let the department chair speak to that a little bit, but you can see that for this year, the number of tests that we'll potentially have is 1,150. And since 2008, we've only had 1 year higher than that. So that's something that's really exciting to see our AP numbers up so much.
In the English department, there's a list of things that we are doing to increase both engagement and passing scores. So pre and post testing, many departments pre and post test to measure not only individual student growth, but also to look at groups. How do you help all groups progress? Because you don't, when you're teaching AP, you don't just want to get your 3s, you want to get those who are possibly 5s too. You're pushing everyone, and so we're looking at sort of bands of students and the types of things we need to do to get everybody to a higher level, not just passing. Right? The AP teachers in English are in their own PLC groups, and they are working to interpret the results from SMART goal assessments and to work with each other on how best to teach to skill. And I've seen some of that in work. It's pretty exciting. In the early grades, 9 and 10, we have adopted sets of common assessments that we believe lean toward AP work, analysis of complex text, with the added expectation of citing or using evidence from that text to prove what a student has read, right? So that's something that without that skill on many of our AP tests of citing evidence, you simply can't get into a passing grade in the writing particularly. And lastly, we've been piloting, I would say, in the past couple of years using the AP Rubric, which is a 1 through 9 writing rubric with freshmen, sophomores, regular juniors, to get them accustomed to a different style of sort of holistic grading. I know this is a lot of academic speak here, but if you want to ask any questions, I'd be happy to take those.
Any questions for Sarah?
Okay.
Go ahead, John. You were talking about the holistic norming grading
Mm-hmm.
process.
Yeah. Sure. The AP rubric, you receive a score from a 1 to 9. And each of those numbers from 1 to 9, I believe it's the same in world language, roughly the same. Each of those numbers, Dr. Keene has a description of what that particular piece of writing did or did not do. So for instance, a 9 addresses the prompts, successfully argues a student's viewpoint, uses liberal use of evidence from the text that the student is writing about, and shows cohesion and development and overall good analytical thinking throughout that piece of writing. And it's timed, of course. So in that 9 would go down to an 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We in the English department have developed an approach where a 5 on that rubric is approximately a 75 to 80%. So we actually have taken that rubric and given it a grade value based on what we're doing in the classroom. I can send you a rubric if you'd like to see it. Or Dee Dee probably has one.
Gary, do you have a question?
No.
Any other questions for Sarah? Okay.
Math is next, and I wanted to make a quick comment about the progress that we've had throughout our years in this chart on top. We've stayed pretty consistent, and I have it's had a pretty consistent pass rate as well. And you see we've had a little blossom, a little bloom for this year. We don't know what their pass rate is yet, but I'm very proud of having a nice little growth when it comes down to participation, because we all know that the harder or more difficult classes that we can take in high school will better prepare them for college readiness. We want them to, unfortunately, feel uncomfortable here, because when they do feel uncomfortable out in the college world, they won't freak out and hopefully not drop out. So I'm really excited about the little growth that we've had. We luckily were able to have 2 AP computer science classes this year, which we haven't had in the past, and plus growth in both computer science and AP stats. I alluded to the department's goals 2 weeks ago, and back to our SMART goals and how one of our SMART goals for the department is a vertical team. So in math, and I know this is also true in science and the other classes, the success of the AP students in math is not strictly owned by the AP teacher. There's a lot of prerequisite skills that are needed for the AP success by all those classes that lead up to an AP Calc or an AP Stats or computer science. So our vertical team is looking at those vocabularies, those skills that could be taught in maybe an honors algebra 1 that might be used and benefit in a calculus, talking about function notation or set notation or all these other things. So next PLC, which is a week from Thursday, our vertical team is meeting again. So one team that's built just for the calculus track, another team that's built for the AP Stats track, and we're going to be looking at gaps, we're going to be looking at vocabulary, and actually at the end of this year, our SMART goal product is going to have, we're going to create summer packets. So if you're a student experience AP or honors pre-calc this year. It was the first year that they received a summer packet of information that they should know prior to the class. We're going to use that model and have those type of packets for our geometry, honors geometry, and honors algebra 1 students as well. Give them an idea of the prerequisite skills necessary so they're better prepared for the class.
Any questions for Doug? Okay.
All right, I think I'm next in science land. So one of the things we're doing is moving into next year, believe it or not, course recommendations for our current juniors is coming up shockingly soon. And one of the things we're looking at is looking at juniors and thinking about classes that they're taking next year, but then also current sophomores. And classes that traditionally are senior level APs like AP Bio, Chemistry, AP Environmental Science, you tend to have that lag or that gap between when a student takes an introductory level course in that area and then when the AP comes into play. And so the thinking is if we could take really, really driven sophomores and not have them wait until senior year to take those APs, but a more natural thing could be pairing up and maybe take as juniors take the physics class and then another AP that they're very passionate about that might, Sarah alluded to not just looking at passing scores, but really cranking up their performance on the tests. And we think that hitting juniors that double up in those areas can be an effective way to go moving forward. We've also started in virtually all of our AP Sciences creating those summer packets that kids do prior to that first day of school. And then within that first week, the teacher has a very good read on what sorts of things the class as a whole has a fundamental grasp of, what are some things that need to be revisited. And it also kind of streamlines and directs the learning in the curriculum along the way too. Our AP teachers are engaging in more formative assessments early in the instructional process for kids, and then using those outcomes and how they're doing on various objectives to guide and gauge their future teaching. So what do kids know? What do they not know? How do we feel about that? What are we going to do about it moving forward? And then added to that is more of a reflective piece that students are doing too. So really keeping track of, all right, I'm good at this objective, but I'm falling behind on objectives 3 and 4. So I really need to spend more focused time doing that. And the teacher can help and partner with the students in terms of how they're going to get that done. And then finally, on my list of things that we're working on is our AP courses are shifting more towards open-ended scientific inquiry. And part of the AP test itself is making students design or create a lab to test some phenomenon based on a certain list of materials that kids would have to utilize. And so kids are put in that uncomfortable feeling of, all right, I got to design an experiment that's controllable and testable and valid, and how do I do it with this set of materials? So a number of our teachers are working those types of assessments into the curriculum, making kids do them and perform them as lab activities, but then also place them on their unit and practice AP tests along the way.
And one idea that we've been talking about and kind of brainstorming with the summer packets is perhaps offering like a blitz of a 4-day period where students could come and attend and get some help with the packet and kind of go through some of that material instead of just giving the students a packet and if a student is struggling, trying to have them figure out some of the information on their own, but having an opportunity over the summer where students could come in and get some really intense help on the prerequisite skills that they need before taking the course.
So I have one question for you. If I'm looking at the number of tests, I'm looking at English is in the 200s for 2014, mathematics is 265, social science 426, and I see science a little bit below that. How can you drive, or what are you using to drive more enrollment into the AP science?
Well, it kind of fluctuates from year to year, but junior level teachers having those conversations with their kids about forward thinking and thinking about college and college-like experiences and really trying to encourage kids to reach out of their comfort zone And a lot of that stems from getting kids hooked into science, getting them interested and motivated, and getting them psyched to try something new and different as it comes to taking an elective their senior year.
And how are you, what kind of strategies are you going to use with that to get them more hooked on science?
Well, I mean, engaging them in the material in class is paramount to that, and I think having regular times where teachers can connect with kids and think about and conference with them about what are their interests in the future, and and Student Services does a great job of thinking about college pathways, and they're built into our curriculum guide. And so there's a lot of that literature out there in the school, and teachers are aware of that too, and can push them along the way.
Gotcha. Any other question, Brian?
This is more for Kristen. Are the colleges still giving college credit if you get a 4 or 5 or a 3? I know they want the revenue as well,
Yes.
tuition. So what's happening with that?
It all depends on the college that a student goes to. A 3 might count in one school, whereas a 3 on that same test might not count in another school. And it does kind of vary, and change every so often, probably based on the income that the school is getting and things of that nature. But, regardless of whether or not a student earns a 3, or whether or not a student earns a 3 and then receives college credit, they're still receiving that high-quality college experience. But
it's a great thing.
Yeah.
But when Matt was suggesting what are we doing to drive participation, I would hope it would be the love of the whatever the study is, but this might also help if indeed they knew that.
It certainly does help, but to say, whether or not more and more schools are, only accepting a 5, it really depends on the college, and it depends by each test.
But they all consider the rigor of the course.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's
They're
a
looking to
benefit.
see if you took the toughest courses in order to get entrance, regardless of that, right?
And are we getting that word out to the kids, but more importantly, their parents?
Absolutely.
I'd like to add one thing, I'm sorry, Doug. We've seen a lot of success even from our 1s and 2s. Our 1s and 2s that go into a AP stat or a stats class in college and do so well that they don't have to take a final. So I know that 3 is very important to the kid and to us, but they benefit a lot from that 180 days of curriculum, and they also benefit from that one test that they take as well. But we've heard stories and emails back from graduates and how well they've done in classes, even though they didn't pass out of that AP test.
Do we have,
Do we
the other
have,
thing with Ed, real
Okay.
quick, is that some schools, I think your daughter might have experienced this, we had this talk, or somebody had to talk, if it's in their field of their major, they'll usually just give them a general ed credit and still make them take that course if it's something they're majoring in, because they want the course to be taken as their major from their school. Sorry, Laura.
picking up on how important it is, I know it's kind of a paradigm shift, because when we first brought in AP courses, parents were looking for their 3, 4, or 5 because the course was paid for in college. As kids got more and more AP courses, colleges began to accept less and less of them because they want the revenues. As one board member, I can't speak for everyone, for me it was always important that my kids took AP classes, whether they got a 1 on the test or whatever. It was the exercise, they had to take the test, they had to go to class. It's not like college after 6 weeks, you can just drop out and say, I'm not going to do well. And as a board member, I completely support the amount of effort you put into those courses. And what we do at RB is we don't track our kids. We don't limit who can take an AP course. It's another thing that I value very highly with what we do here. So one question, I'm wondering if maybe even during Kevin, We Are RB night, when the 8th grade parents come in, or even during freshmen, are we speaking to some of our parents to talk about exactly what you're talking today? It's not only we're going to get the 3, 4, or 5, but it's the rigor. It's so that when they hit the college class, they don't panic, change majors, It could just be an anomaly, a bad class. You stick it through. You've gone through this. You've passed it in the past. Are we talking about the value of the course for the value's sake?
Right, I would hope that we are. I'm going to shift that question to Pam as the principal. and how their discussions and presentations
Yes,
are?
but possibly not as directly as we could. I think that where it would really make sense is we know we have all of our 8th grade families on the, that 8th grade night where we give them their Explore scores, and then we go through the curriculum that they're exposed to and the choices that they'll have as freshmen. But I think giving them more of a vision of where they need to be by the time they exit is a great idea. I know our counselors do that when they meet with them in groups, but when you have them all there together, the parents and the children, that's a good conversation to start. So that's something that we can definitely push a little bit more directly. I know that we're doing it in different ways, but that's one of the only times we have them all together.
I mean, it breaks my heart when somebody says, oh, my kid took the AP, but they didn't get college credit. Well, they did very well. The course grade was very well. They got a B in the course, and maybe they got a 3 in the test for some, who knows why, the way it scored. I think that student did exceptionally well in that course. So to gauge a program, to gauge a course based on did I get money in college, I think we're missing the mark there. And so as a cultural shift, we definitely want to talk about your college may or may not accept it. It's the economy of the states, whatever. We'll know if the course was successful when your child is in college and they do well in their college courses.
Sure.
Can I make a suggestion? We didn't hear from Ms. McGrath
Yeah.
and Mr.
Oh, yes.
Beasley, and we're asking a
Give me
lot
the
of
break.
general questions. I don't want
Mr.
them to get a
Beasley,
short
But
shrift.
I have a science question.
Oh,
All right.
If we're, you know, the last time we talked about the ACT, science was sort of in the same position where that score was a little lower than your math or your English, and I'll just use math or English because it's kind of easy to compare and contrast. And we talked about math, and we said that math courses taught and had problems and things that were similar to the ACT test, and we kind of had a correlation to that. And when we discussed science, we said science didn't correlate well to the ACT test. So my question is, how is the AP curriculum, you know, and compare that to the AP test, based on the discussion we had last time where you said the science curriculum in general wasn't geared towards the ACT test, where we're being measured for our success by the state, and there was a little bit of a disconnect there.
Sure.
And so how is the curriculum for the AP versus the AP tests, and then how does that relate to then the science being a little less than everyone else on average?
Yeah, I think it's a different animal with AP because since it is a national curriculum and a college course curriculum, there is very much more direct alignment between, hey, this is what a student is going to be assessed on, and then these are the goals and objectives of the class. So there's a much tighter alignment there. With that, though, comes the, in a sense, a bit of a crapshoot on what a kid will actually be asked to do, particularly in like a free response setting or scenario on the test. Some years they throw some curveballs at you. Other years tend to be a little bit more catered to the overall blanket of skills that kids do in class.
And would you relate that, the unknown aspect of it, to reflect in the lower scores? Or as a society, are our kids a little less adept in science than they are in math and English?
It could be part of it. In part, too, a couple of the science classes in particular have a very high level of difficulty to them. And then combo that with, we also have a science course, too, that's very open access, and we push kids to really challenge themselves to even take it. So kind of the situation where we were talking with 1s and 2s can still be looked at as, hey, I'm doing a good thing here because I might not be taking a course like this if I were in a different building, or might have been pushed to take a 4th year of science. I still look at that as a positive situation.
Okay. Why don't we start with Mr. Beasley? Why don't you?
In reference to some of the questions that have been
You can talk about your department.
okay. you know, we, you know, I would say a couple things. I would say one is we've become a lot more focused on using data in AP Micro and AP Macro in terms of what we've done is we've taken previous, you know, we used to have a mishmash of questions where you'd have some AP questions from previous years and some questions from textbooks and now we have every single unit test and every single subunit test is explicitly from a previous test bank. So we've cataloged them by sub so that the kids are constantly getting practice from the actual AP questions. And with that, we know exactly where they are, literally every week, every 2 weeks, in terms of exactly what they don't know and what they know. And then we're also doing these mastery quizzes where, you know, frankly, we've talked to students about this and we've said, you know, hey, we used to have retake an entire test and we found out that that wasn't the most efficient, using an economics term, use of our time, that we could get a lot more bang for our buck if we really focused on 5 to 6 questions and item analyses that were really specific to that, to a concept that students were missing. So we've seen some really wonderful gains, not just from the 2s to the 3s, but the 3s to the 4s and the 4s to the 5s in the last year, in both of those courses. The other thing you know, we're really working on, frankly, is that economics, just like AP US and just like AP Gov, they're reading tests in as much as anything else. And you know, we could talk about concepts and we could talk about content, but you know, to Mr. Denny's point, a lot of this is, you know, working with students about, you know, what is the main idea? Circle the key word. You know, what is the implication of this? This is the explicit statement, but what's the implication of this question? And so what we're really trying to do in Western civilization, which sort of goes back to your question about how do we send the message that we believe in AP in a challenging curriculum, is using Western civilization as a class, not only where we're really targeting reading skills through mini cues, especially. We're really, there is this wonderful thing called, I almost don't want to say it publicly because I'm afraid everybody will start using it, but there's some really good publications out there that literally put together these mini DBQs where kids are taking different documents and making connections. And we have students starting to do this now. By October 20th, kids have already, August 25th, literally about 2 weeks into the school year, kids have already seen some of these mini cues. The idea being, if a young person is going to have success in a class like AP US as a junior or even AP Micro Macro as a sophomore, they've got to be able to read turgid texts. They have to not be intimidated when they're seeing difficult texts. And so we're really trying to work through that with our freshmen, and in the next couple of weeks talk with some of the junior highs and present them with some of the things that students are seeing literally late August, you know, the very first quarter, the kinds of difficult readings that they're going to have to do. A lot of it is simply exposure to complex texts. And you know, Sarah Johnson and
sounds like English to me.
But you know what, it is. But you'd be amazed in economics how much of it is understanding what the key word is in a sentence. And if a student can't identify that key word, they can understand the economics concept, but it's not going to get them very far. And you know, we talk about this moment also with students, back to the college point, where, you know, we don't want students to have their first terrifying moment in a lecture hall of 200 students. To speak to Doug's point, we care enough about them where we want them to have that sort of, I hate to say it, but that horrific moment in front of us, because we're their safety net and we can work through their frustration with them. So to your point, it's not just about scores, although I'm very proud of some of the, you know, some of the scores, but it's understanding that difficulty and working through that difficulty in terms of reading is what's going to get them through college. So,
any questions?
One quick question. The numbers for social science are huge, so you must have a couple popular classes in your area. What are they?
I think one of the reasons why it's huge is we're the only ones who have a lot of sophomores taking AP tests. So it's an unfair advantage. We have
it's
a
economics.
jump start. We have a jump start in social studies. If you look at the numbers, you would in any high school, frankly, I mean, it'd be wonderful to say this weren't the case, but you would see social studies having the lion's share because you have all these opportunities for AP. So it's not that it's the fact that we get a jump start sophomore year.
But don't discredit your hard work and your staff's hard work. To achieve, 78% pass rate's pretty darn impressive.
That
John.
leads to actually my question, Christian, and I was going to ask you this question. This overall performance indicator, is that a fair indicator to look at when we're comparing the state when 1/3 of all our AP tests are coming from social science? Is that what the rest of the state has it coming from, 1/3, or is there a higher percentage coming in the math department and the English department? What we're comparing this overall performance indicator, because that's driving that high rate.
Are you referring to the first number with the AP students? With
Yeah, and then
passing
the second
scores?
question is, how does this 69.5, 72.4 compare to the next page, when you're saying the passing rate is 66 and 64? How do they compare together?
Can we let?
And Ms. McGrath is.
So I know, but led the
Answer,
question
and then
about the
Kristen,
number,
think
but
about
yeah,
your
so
answer.
you get a chance to answer.
Don't worry,
All right.
just so you know.
Sarah, jump.
That's all right. With world languages, there's a few things that we're really working on. Working with the feeder schools is very important to us. A lot of our numbers in AP are students that start in our level 2 as freshmen. We do have a German program that they work really hard to get that all done in 4 years because we don't have a strong program in the junior high. So the feeder schools are something that we take that very seriously, our conversations with them. Also, a heritage speaker class is something that's changed over the last few years. We look at that as a pre-AP class. We want to use those AP skills, the reading, everything that my colleagues are talking about to get those students prepared for the language class and the literature class. This is a class that we're hoping to run soon. It ran as a combination class that didn't really work for us, so we're trying to figure out how we can do some creative things to get the enrollment up in our literature class, because that would help get our numbers up for our AP. And then just echoing what everyone said, we're really working now. The AP tests have changed a lot in the last few years, where the skills that they're assessing are things that we would like them to do. They're speaking, reading, writing in the language. So we're using those assessments in the lower levels. We're using the rubrics across all languages now because the tests are similar. So being able to use the colleagues in German, Spanish, and French, and use the skills of all of our colleagues to strengthen those specific skills they need on the test have really helped us. So we're looking at more data than we have been in the past and really finding who has the strong points, who's doing well on certain skills, and sharing and collaborating together on that.
Any questions on world language?
Let me just ask one, because it's specific to yours. How many world language APs do we offer?
We have, right now we offer AP Spanish language, German language, and French language. In the past, we've offered Spanish literature as a combination class, but now with our larger class sizes, we weren't able to do that, and it didn't have a high enough enrollment to run this year.
So in your instance, you're pretty much dealing with 3 different sets of students taking the course, the test, versus probably some of the other areas like math or science, where a lot of the same students are taking both math and science, and maybe more than one math and science, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, so.
Got the answer, Kristen?
Do you have your answer?
Yes. I don't have hard data in front of me. I could look at that, but I would say, the distribution between subject areas is probably pretty typical of any high school that offers as many AP courses that we do.
So you believe there's 1/3 of it is in social science across the state?
Well, the number of social studies tests are, the number of tests offered within the social studies is I was, after the question was answered, you could probably see my fingers moving. I was trying to count up how many social studies. Oh, it's more than 6 or 7. It's because we don't even offer all of them. And we could, because frankly, there's in a 7-period day.
Right, but just here, I think we have 7 different AP electives, right?
Yes. So, yes. How many can you possibly offer? And, you got your,
Plus,
you got your top.
Your 2 micros are the only 2 APs that are just 1 semester courses, right?
Correct.
So most kids take both, and they get
Well,
2
micro, macro, and gov are all 1
one semester.
Oh, I'm sorry. But the micro and macro, a lot of kids take both as opposed to 1 year of
Right.
science or math, right?
Absolutely. That doubles you out, absolutely.
Okay, so I have one question for everybody at the table here. I know the key is to make our students grow and push them and to make them happen. Do we set up a gate, though? There are certain kids that shouldn't be in AP. Because the fact is, they've started so low and we pushed them up, and honors is almost taking that student and pushing him like we would in AP. So my key thing is, for the AP, do we set up something to make sure that a kid's not taking the AP, that we're really setting him up for failure? You could try to push him as much as you can, but really it's honors where he needs to really focus and do his efforts. Do we do that?
We got to be cautious before any of them answer. The board needs to be cautious because sometimes in a senior year especially, or a junior year, you want to make sure you're not creating a path of least resistance to where a student will still get a bonus on their GPA but not challenge themselves to the point of where they take an AP. That was something as a principal I continued had to work with, and our district spent a lot of time on focusing on seniors the senior year, because across the country, not the state, but the country, it's been proven fact that students continue to regress by the time they're a senior, they're taking a few electives, they usually have an early dismissal, they tend not to push themselves. So we have to make sure that we have those bridges there for those students, because the benefit of a kid who can't be successful in an AP there's still a huge benefit for them taking an honors. So you still want to have that island there for them to land on.
I agree.
But we also want to make sure that we're not creating too big of an area for the kid that should probably be pushing himself doesn't go and say, hey, I'll just take honors, still get the extra point on my GPA, will help my rank, but I won't have to do as many papers or as many readings. And the other thing that we need to be realistic with the board, with our goals, I know with our high goals, is that we have two. We want to grow enrollments, but at the same token, by growing enrollments, we understand that there might be some students that are going to never have a chance of probably achieving a 3 or better. So we have to weigh that. Even, as our enrollments increase, our goal here with these goals and what we're trying to drive is college and career readiness. So we may sacrifice some of that equity and excellence of not getting as many passing 3s, but we were getting more kids prepared for college by maybe taking more rigorous courses. I know that sounds contradictory, but think about that for a second.
Makes sense to me.
Does Matt's question fall on them, or does it fall on the counselors, or does it fall on a combination?
I'd be interested to hear how they would respond.
Well, I'll just speak to social studies. Western civilization, we use that course for freshmen, not only to emphasize the reading skills, but to have those one-on-one, the expectation is those teachers are having one-on-one discussions with the students by, gosh, it's so early now, November. It's now pushed up to, early December, late November, where we talk with those students and we recommend them for courses. But I think you're absolutely right. You want to stretch a student. You absolutely don't want to set them up for something that's unrealistic. If a student isn't recommended for an AP class, or they can turn to at that point they can turn to one of us and say, hey, look, I really want to get in this class. But that's when you have that discussion. Look at the commitment that this is going to require. This is a 45-minute to an hour-long commitment. For an average student, for a student who is probably well suited for this course, for you it may be an hour and a half. What kind of commitment is this really reasonable for you? And we have those conversations in this kind of a small school. We're able to do that.
And that's what I was getting at. Are we making sure that we're pushing
Absolutely.
our kids, but we're making them succeed?
There's also one more misconception that might be floating out there, is that our non-honors courses are not rigorous enough. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that our regular level classes are college preparatory classes. So if a student chooses not to take a AP physics or an AP calculus, they do have the option to take a zoology or a college algebra class, which will prepare them for college readiness, or will prepare them to be ready. So that secret word honors isn't a magic pill that's going to make them ready, or the secret word AP doesn't either. I think people need to understand that our other classes also prepare our students as well.
We, John and I have a shared class in Honors American Studies. I know many of you are familiar with that course. It came on just two years ago, right? Came back 2 years ago. And I just wanted to highlight that on the first page of Kristen's report, 24 of those students elected to take the AP Literature exam from that course. And while only half of those students passed, which I think is reason for celebration, the other half got experience in that, and in that rigor, right? And that timed setting of an AP test, and a couple of them went on to take an AP in their senior year, which I can't prove, but one might suggest that was as a result of trying it. Right.
Very good point. I have one more question, Kristen. I know that we talked about before in academics how we're going to try to start tracking our graduates and what's going on. Are we going to also use that tracking to see how if they took AP classes, where they're doing? Are we looking at that at all, or can we look at that?
Well, I can answer that. Did you know about the student tracker? Because, okay, you can speak to it then, because you weren't at our meeting on Monday. You were.
Well, we're looking at, Ms. Augustine had presented about the student tracker to really track our students after they graduate RB and how successful they are in college. And so that's one thing that we're looking to purchase. And I believe we are going to move forward with that this week so that we can hopefully get that up and running so we can track our students and how successful they're going to be in college.
Good.
That's like $425 each year, and I think it was 96% of the universities in the United States, the colleges and universities, are a part of this program, so it can track your kids. Not only, like, did it take them 4 years to finish, 5 years, what they got their degree in, it's a pretty good tool. I don't know, then we would have to correlate some of that with what they took here. It won't do that, but it will give you that longitudinal data of what's happening with your students after they've matriculated.
Okay, any other questions for?
I have 3 questions.
Okay.
First, I want you to see, I listened to what you're supposed to teach the kids, but this is a graph between your departments of our, there's a mistake on there, but of our success in the last 3 years. How do you correlate or work together to see why, one is going steady up, one jumped high, one went like that, 2 went like that, 1 went down? I mean, it seems odd in a sense of me being ignorant of, who's taking a test, of why within our own school the departments vary so much, and how do you, can you explain a little why, and since this is the group, how do you go together and say, why is one group going up and one going down, and what can we do about that?
So one thing is just looking in the chart for pass rates, you have to keep in mind that, 1% in fine arts is a lot different than moving a % in social studies based on the enrollment. And so that's one thing that we need to keep in mind, is that when we're looking solely at pass rates, we need to also look at enrollment and the number of students behind that.
I'm talking about the overall. I know there's different numbers, but they're still at the high level. Some are going up and down, some are going down and up, some are going up, some are going down, and that still I don't think you can explain by, there's one more person in fine arts or what have you.
No, you can't. I just think that that's one thing that we need to keep in mind. And so one thing that we do towards the start of each year is we look at the data in detail by course for the past 3 years, and as a leadership team, and we start to have those conversations. And sometimes we have each department chair reflect on a set of questions based on their pass rates and their enrollment. And then we have that discussion as a broader team to identify, are there things that we need to address as a building? Are there things that we can benefit from learning about each department and what they do? Like, for example, social studies does a lot of review sessions, especially in micro and macro. And so can we incorporate that model into other courses, and would that be successful? And so we're constantly having those conversations as a leadership team to identify, what's really working in your department, and can we incorporate that in our department and our AP tests. And there are a lot of different variables to really look at, the types of tests that are being offered within each department, and then how they vary from courses, the teachers that are, teaching them. For example, world languages, we had 2 brand-new AP teachers last year, and the AP teachers before that had left. So they didn't have that support of working with other AP teachers. So how can we reach out within their department, but then also as a building?
And so maybe you answered my second question. If I, ask Mr. Schultz or Mr. Denny, for instance, do we do better in AP chemistry versus AP physics, or I don't know what math I should know, but the different math courses you have? I mean, do we look specifically to say, let's just for sake of discussion, say for some reason we tend to do much better in chemistry than physics. What do we do different in chemistry versus physics that we could move that other course up?
Right.
And again, I don't know what the results are, so
Yeah,
I'm using
I
it as an
know.
example.
And sometimes it's a teacher looking at that test afterwards to see what was placed in front of the actual students, It's a different blend a little bit every year of what actually gets on that test.
Sure.
And that you do have ups and downs in terms of national averages between, hey, it's a low AP environmental year, but it's a high physics year. And with that, our averages kind of follow suit in a sense.
I do have to say, we are competing over the same students. With only, a limited amount of students, and sometimes they'll gravitate to math one year, and sometimes they'll gravitate to science the other year, because there is only a certain amount of periods in the day for us to do it. So there is this ebb and flow,
Yep.
if you will, to see who's willing to take what test at one year.
Tim, can I, on your chart too, because you held up the chart, your chart
It's
assumes.
an unofficial chart.
Right, right, but.
It's
not gonna be graded.
And it's not to
Right,
scale,
but
so it looks
In
accentuated.
defense, your chart, when you connected the dots, you assumed a relationship, and you can't, because a student may only take one course. Those dots shouldn't be connected. And so you should use a different model to represent that data. And so that would be a better.
I like my model, whether you like it or not. My last question, and maybe really, I guess it goes to everybody, maybe Ms. Harsey the most. One thing that I find, and the
Ms. Johnson.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. One thing that seems to really have an impact, and Mr. Beasley touched on it across the boards, is how strong students' vocabulary is. So you talked about it a little, but I mean, is it something that we constantly have to work at, just try to grow the vocabulary? Because if they don't understand the vocabulary in math as well as the next person, they could be brilliant mathematicians and not be able to read, really fully understand the passage then.
I could talk a long time about academic vocabulary, Mr. Walsh, but I would say that I think of, if I could be so bold, of the initiatives that we have looked at as departments and as collaborative teachers, the vocabulary initiative has arguably been the strongest one that we've pushed. Word walls, were you to step into most classrooms here, I think you'd see a very vocabulary-rich room. And we studied several years ago under some experts, really national experts, about how to do that, and worked hard to roll that out throughout the building. And some of those practices are very strong. Some of those we need to kind of inject with a little bit of passion. But you're absolutely right. Vocabulary alone is probably the strongest intervention of all interventions when it comes to success in school.
But you're recognizing and you're all trying to work on improving it across the board, then, okay.
And working not only on those what we call domain specific, meaning like hypothesis or photosynthesis, and then, I don't know, whatever you guys talk about in math, right? But also those other level of words like institution or analysis or production, things that for some students you would think they would be obvious, but they're not. They're kind of like automatic words that our kindergartners had to study, that'd be automatic. Those they have to be automatic with. So we're working on that actually this year.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Wait, Gary has 2 more. I like how we're not naming.
Does anyone have any more after Gary?
I do.
Have any what?
And does
The
anyone
test
have any more after
the
Laura?
AP test that we did take, is there a published percentage of pass on nationwide or statewide on these? And how do we compare to that? And secondly, I'm going to go back to my skewed question. Can we look at the state average and see that, I mean, if social science is coming in and a third of the AP body, people taking tests at high schools is social science, then that's a fair comparison to look at that aggregate number. But if it isn't, then it's not fair to look at that aggregate number as a benchmark that we're using. And that's all I want, because if you pull social science out, we're underneath that. Now, I'm not discounting economics, because we do have an economist on the board here, but I'm just trying to see if how we're comparing an aggregate number to our performance. And it's difficult for me to see that especially when you have a skewed scenario there, one department is over 1/3 of the overall test taking.
We'll look into that.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Gary, you had 2 questions.
Those was 2.
Oh.
The one is the individual
He
test,
interloped it into it.
Okay.
compare that
Oh.
percentage,
Use that
and then
domain.
the other one is the aggregate.
Hold on, Paige.
Nice work.
This is a rhetorical question. I don't know, and I don't expect you to answer it now. And I've kept kind of talking about summer school. We use summer school for sports, but might you consider like a 3-week, 4-day science kind of enrichment to get ready for an AP course? Even no credit, come with your Starbucks. It's gonna be fun. We can do our packets. And if we don't get the enrollment, we don't run it. But if we don't start to offer these kind of things, we're never gonna get the enrollment. And if we're ever gonna have this kind of summer school program, it's gotta be a cultural shift. We can have some of the art courses, but if we have mini courses, and I think what's daunting is when there's a 6-week course, students are in sports, travel, whatever, but you might take a 2-week, 4 days a week, a mini or something to try it.
It's
And
definitely
then-
something Pam and her
Yeah.
department chairs can think about.
I think they recommend,
They
they were
recommend-
talking about a pre-package
Well,
for
they
4
had the
days.
packet, so make it like a course, like, instead of just kind of a study hall, but make it like a course with a little instruction, and you do the packet, and then maybe you're psyched to try something.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you all for attending today, I appreciate it. Stay here, we got you one more up there, all right?
Real quick, this is just a brief,
All I gotta say right now, when Mike Connors wears a suit, I know he's presenting, so.
Patricia Reeves, that we normally, you have something you want to add to the conversation, you can add it really quick here. I know you kept raising your hand.
Say, as a parent, I wanted to thank RB for these great opportunities that my daughter had here in the school. She graduated basically about a year and a half ago, and she's currently at Elmhurst. She will be able to do 2 majors because she saved all this time doing AP courses here. And not only that, but the way that they decide on scholarships is by what kind of rigorous courses you have taken in a high school. And usually they look at science, math, English, social studies, and foreign languages. And they recalibrate a GPA, which is different from what might be shown on a normal transcript. And you're talking about thousands of dollars that these students could save, and more importantly for the student, it saves them time. This is how students can go do things internationally. They don't have to worry about whether these courses fit in. It will impact housing, like first dibs on the best dorms. It will impact things like whether a student can take a course, because you have more options as an older student than as a freshman. And I think that is absolutely something that RB offered my daughter, which is incredible. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia.